Kind of bomb or something? Alright, let's go. Hello everyone, this is CM Kozeman again, and today we are gonna be talking about the infamous Georgia Guidestones, the eccentric and mysterious US monument or roadside attraction, which got destroyed quite recently in a mysterious bomb attack. So this is gonna be the virgin CM Kozeman experience for many of you, because I guess this video is gonna attract a lot of people interested in conspiracies, or maybe have a negative outlook on these Guidestones or the supposed elites who created or placed them. So if you're a newcomer, please be respectful. As you will see in this video, I'm not here to trash anybody's view, even if it's contrary to mine. We're just going to be examining these interesting stones, looking at their principles, and going into a great number of strange side tangents from there on. So if you're a newcomer, please say hi and have a nice time. Please have no axe to polish, but only your thoughts to burnish. Okay, so today is the 19th of July 2022, and a week ago these strange Guidestones were destroyed. But what are the Georgia Guidestones? Let's have a look at them. They're like this Stonehenge-esque, kind of cheesily designed monument erected in 1979, and they were standing in a corner of Georgia, the US state of Georgia, until recently. Well, they have this kind of center stone with like 4 wing stones and a capstone, and on them there are inscribed commandments of like prophetic nature, kind of like big hopes for the future kind of stuff, and it's in a number of different languages. There's our Chinese inscriptions, Russian inscriptions, English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, and Arabic and Hebrew inscriptions, and classical Greek inscriptions, and even inscriptions in Egyptian hieroglyphics. I wonder how accurate these translations were, but now that these monuments have been blown up, we're never gonna find out. And there's like a little glory hole in one corner which points entirely towards the North Star in a certain day or something. And there's a little like hole in the ceiling. There was a little hole in the ceiling which pointed towards the sun. And so there used to be many astronomic features in here as well. There also used to be this other inscription next to it, which explained the astronomic features. So there's a channel that indicates the celestial pole. There's a horizontal glory hole that indicates the annual travel of the sun. And I guess throughout the year there's a sundial feature there was. And this was interesting. The author was R.C. Christian, a pseudonym. And the sponsors were a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. Of course, this is very utopian thinking, and this was erected in the 1970s, 1979 to be precise. So there was also a time capsule below it to be opened on date unknown. Okay, so let's go. This, of course, is a famous monument, and infamous as well. Especially in the last 10 years or something, it became internet famous. You know, there are lots of news articles about it. Some of them just explain this as an interesting monument. Others have these like more conspiratorial slant about them. It says like, this is my favorite. Christians crush satanic agenda in Ukraine by somehow blowing up the Georgia Guidestones, act of God, or deep state psyop. You can never be sure. Is it a win or a loss? Or there was this article about blood being smeared on them, apparently, because of human sacrifice, as far as I can tell. And there are also lots of regular articles, like nobody knows how to interpret it. But I think the most egregious thing about this monument was that it was praised by Yoko Ono, who is like one of the worst freeloaders in arts and cultural history ever to live. That I can say with certainty. So it was also attacked numerous times. I think in 2016 or 28 that is to say 2008, someone wrote, "You will not succeed, Jesus will beat you, Satanist." So this monument got known as a satanistic monument for some reason, and quite recently it was vandalized again. This was a more low budget attempt at vandalization, and in fact maybe they were like taking the piss out of it, because it says God is superstition, infowars.com, God JC, Jesus Christ. So it was like kind of like an edgy, tongue-in-cheek, I think it's like a bored teenager's act of vandalism. It was with graphite, so quite easy to wash off. And in Georgia, a local politician in fact made it a corner point of her agenda to basically destroy this monument, because she thought it was a mark made by a satanistic elite ruling the US and the world. Once again, if you are this lady or one of her followers or someone who thinks like her, you know, brother, sister, I got nothing against you. I'm just telling the story as it is. But this candidate, so she made it like one of her ruling executive orders. She said, if I'm elected, I will execute order number 10 and demolish the Georgia Guidestones. It's quite interesting to think, if there's a global elite powerful enough to rule the world and like have human sacrifices and maybe in communion with demons, who knows, why would they have this single point of failure? Like, why would you like blow up the monument? I don't know. But this lady is an interesting candidate, to say the least. Another one of her executive orders was the total banning of furry clothing in schools or elsewhere. And how is she going to enforce this? How is this legislation going to be written? I have no idea. So as this became a kind of contentious issue in the state of Georgia, recently someone came over, set up the bomb, and they blew it up. The stones are no more. The attack left them in this state. So it was unstable. So later on it was bulldozed and permanently closed. So sad. Now we're no longer gonna be able to see this interesting roadside attraction. I mean, I've been to the US a few times, and in most of those times I took big road trips, and I really enjoyed stopping over at every little like roadside attraction, you know, world's biggest ball of twine, or those strange concrete dinosaurs they have in the West Coast, or other minor places. So it's one less attraction that for me or for other enjoyers of roadside Americana, I guess. So in that respect, I think it's a bad deed. I don't think the stones were like extremely beautiful or whatever, but the world is a less interesting place with them gone. So Candace Taylor, after this attack, this was the politician we saw earlier, the lady. So she looks like a alternative universe version of Lindsay Ellis. Maybe an evil Dracaverse twin of Lindsay Ellis. Who knows? Anyways, and let's play this animation one more time. Because it's just too funny to pass up. Anyways, then Candace Taylor tweeted, God is God all by himself. He can do anything he wants to do. That includes striking down the satanic Guidestones. Of course, this was clearly a bomb planted by an enthusiastic vandal, let's say. So to that God, I would only ask, what does God need with tannerite? Because the bomb was most likely made with tannerite. Tannerite, if you don't know, if you're not an American, it's this kind of over-the-counter explosive that people sell over there. Basically, it's not registered as an explosive because you have to mix it first, and then when you shoot it with a gun, it goes kaboom. It's like really loud, but I guess not too dynamic, so it's not as strong as TNT or something. So this guy who we saw here planting the cat bomb, this guy here, it's probably like a bag of tannerite or something. I don't know. Maybe it's a pipe bomb, or maybe it's just good old TNT. But the point remains. I mean, if God is omnipotent and omniscient and he can do anything by himself, why does he need this explosive plantation? If you know the Star Trek movie this came from, also kudos to you. Oh, America, by the way, is a wonderful place. Tannerite is a big company that makes these explosives, and they even have a gender reveal boombox. So basically, when you have a kid, the gender is determined in the examinations, of course, and then it's become trendy recently all over the world. It's a boy, it's a girl. So if you're like really traditional, you can have pink or blue tannerite, and then daddy shoots the target and it goes kaboom. So depending on the color of the smoke, you know it's a boy or it's a girl. Also, people quite on the opposite end of the political spectrum from Candace Taylor might also use these targets for gender change reveal parties. Now imagine if you're a boy, decided you were a girl, so you throw a hell of a party. Get a pink AR-15, shoot all those pink tannerite boomboxes. America, it's a beautiful, beautiful country. I love you, America. But anyway, let's go on with the Georgia Guidestones. Let's talk a bit about the origins of these monuments. Okay, cool. We're still recording. So this was, of course, these stones did not fall from the sky. Actually, people paid for them and built them, and there is a very powerful, strong benefactor who's said to be behind all this. And the only person who knows is this old gentleman named Wyatt Martin. So he was a banker who helped broker the agreement for the monument. And in his words, he says, people ask, isn't it hard being the only one left alive who knows who he really was? They could put a gun to my head and kill me. I will never reveal his name. In my age and my profession, you stuck by a promise of confidentiality. Once again, Chad, really good American values. This is the kind of American life that I really like and admire. So this guy knows who had them built, but he will never tell because it's a job secret, a trade secret. Also, there was a businessman who helped engrave the tombstones. Of course, people made these and paid for it and transported them and erected them. So it's not like a bunch of Satanists came over and went, ooh, and then suddenly the stones appeared or whatever. Or it wasn't like some druid kind of types chiseling them away. No, it's just regular business transaction. Anyway, this guy, Mart Clamp, who helped his father engrave the Guidestones because his father passed away. I think this is Mr. Mart Clamp. This is his late father. If you're watching, hello to you and peace be upon you. Best wishes to sunny Georgia. And he says, my long-term goal is to build some sort of festival around it. Something that could be a week-long thing that could be held in 2 or 3 different spots around Alberton. That's the town the Guidestones are located in. Around Alberton, that could really draw in crowds and help the local economy. So before these stones became known as a kind of demonic scapegoat, people were quite cool with it. I mean, it was just something that happened, and local folk wanted to like turn it into a roadside attraction. Of course, then the political axis of the world shifted, and we had numerous terrible crises. So now everyone is looking for someone to blame, and who better to blame except for a deadly satanic cult apparently ruling America and the world from behind the scenes. But they're so satanic, they write down their plan. We are gonna get there. There are some really weird things with these Guidestones, by the way. The weirdness is related to their message, not with their construction or anything. So actually, on the internet, and basically as far as I could find out with a lunchtime of researching, it's most likely that Mr. Ted Turner was behind this monument. He's the guy who owns CNN and TNT network, and he's extremely wealthy, of course. He's like the anti-Murdoch, Rupert Murdoch, who runs Fox News, and I don't think it's his original view, but he likes to peddle Fox News worldviews because it sells better. Ted Turner seems to be a more genuinely benevolent, ultra-rich person, if there could be such a thing. In fact, he has this initiative aimed at reducing nuclear weapons or eliminating them, the NTI initiative, Nuclear Treaty Initiative, I believe. And then, this is very interesting, he personally helped produce the Captain Planet TV show. I was born in the 1980s, so if you're in my generation, this is a TV show about this like diverse group of kids They got all this magic ring. Like most of the rings are elemental, so it's like earth, wind, water, fire. And then one kid has the power of the heart. So they all join their powers and summon Captain Planet. And Captain Planet helps them battle a number of ecological and social ills. It was a fun show. Of course, now I believe I'm certain that a certain cottage industry of conspiracy theorists and now they're trying to link this show with Ted Turner and the Georgia Guidestones and their satanic agenda for ruling the world, but no such thing. I mean, this was a genuinely, in my opinion, a genuinely extremely wealthy guy. Of course, like all extremely wealthy people, he may have had a few fingers or toes in shady dealings, but these dealings are not about Satan or ruling the world. They're just about stock prices and making more money. But he's a really nice eccentric guy. I mean, here are some quotes. He said, "I love this planet. I want to see the environment preserved and I want to see the human race preserved. And I like to see everybody living decently in a more equitable, kind-hearted, thoughtful, generous world." I mean, it's something I could get behind in. If your neighbor next door said this, no big deal. But of course, this is a multi-billionaire, one of the most powerful people on the planet. So of course, when he says things like this, people start looking for hidden motives or hidden agendas. But never forget, I mean, look at this quote. "We have to do more than keep media giants from growing larger. They're already too big. We need a new set of rules that will break these huge companies to pieces." So it's a kind of interesting way to approach it. You would expect someone like him to maybe argue for bigger media companies, but no. But I guess this particular quote, the second quote, might have been said to as a jab against his arch nemesis, Rupert Murdoch. And then my favorite quote is, "I like snakes, I like hummingbirds, there's nothing on the earth I don't like, frogs, salamanders, the bunnies, giraffes, the hippopotamuses." This is Ted Turner. Of course, in one interview, he also said this: a total population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels would be ideal. I guess he was asked about if the world is getting too crowded or not. Now, remember these quotes, because when we look at the Georgia Guidestone commandments in detail, they're going to sound familiar to you. Let me take a sip of coffee. By the way, Mr. Turner, if you're watching this, please send $1 million over to me at patreon.com. Also, everyone watching this show, if you can even spare $1 to support me on Patreon, it would be so much appreciated. Any newcomers, if you're like from the pro-conspiracy side or the conspiracy debunking side, I don't mind. Everyone's welcome. Pitch in $1. The link is below in the video description. So let's go. I mean, it's no wonder Ted Turner spoke like this, because in his heyday, remember also, this monument was erected in 1979. So there was a nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island in the US, almost like a little Chernobyl, but not as damaging. And also the best sellers of that year included this book, The Third World War. Like how apparently in the future a nuclear crisis would emerge. And then this amazing novel by Stephen King, the horror writer. Well, basically one of the plot points in this book is about this mad president who has too much power in his hands. So he is going to trigger World War III. There's a psychic guy who sees the future happening and he does his best to stop him. So it's a nice book. And also a nice movie by David Cronenberg. Go read them all. Go watch them all. So, I mean, this was the political climate during the times when this monument was erected. So it's not like this guy was like suddenly had this domination idea to limit world population and control nuke proliferation or something. Of course, we cannot say with certainty that it was Ted Turner, but it probably was Ted Turner. But if it was any other billionaire, it makes no difference, because many other billionaires were thinking and speculating in similar terms at the time of this monument's construction. So let's look at the historic precedent for monuments like this. I mean, okay, it's a fact of life. When people are struggling for a living, they want to be rich. When they get rich, they first want to if they're guys, they want to bang as many hot chicks as possible. This is an inevitable truth about life. But that wears off after a while. Then they want to leave something permanent behind, you know. If they're especially first generation billionaires, they built this company from the ground up. So they worked non-stop. They worked like crazy. They micromanaged everything. They at most times had no personal life. So these people, at least in America, worked really hard. At least back then. You know, there was no... Let's just say that inherited billionaires were not as common in the 1970s. So once you're past a certain point, you want to leave something behind. You want to leave a monument behind. Maybe a set of rules. Maybe like an ethical thing that will outlive you, and, you know, something more than just making money. So a lot of rich people operate with this principle. And we can argue about how sincere they are or how viable their designs are, but it's just an instinct that happens to people when they get extremely rich and powerful. So, of course, from time immemorial, people have built huge monuments as centers of power. The Stonehenge is one very, very famous example. I think it's one of the models for the Georgia Guidestones. And then throughout the ancient world, there used to be these monuments left by statesmen. And they built these inscriptions all around the corners of their empires. Heck, I live in the country that has the most relics from such empires. For example, near an ancient city, I forgot the name, Arsenius by somewhere, there's this huge monument. And it's just a big invocation of rituals and religious good deeds that this king did. The great King Antiochus, God, righteous, Epiphanes, this is a kind of adjective, basically something like a righteous person. Friend of the Romans, Philaline, son of King Mithridates, Callinicus, and Queen Laodice, the daughter of Antiochus, on and on. So it's like a big invocation of who he was and what rituals he did in which temples in order to basically appease the gods and appease the people. There's another monument in Ankara. Basically, this is the town I was born in. Goes back all the way to the Romans. This is Emperor Augustus's list of deeds. So Augustus was a big Roman emperor. So all around different parts of his empire, he had these monuments commissioned in which he wrote his deeds, basically, like what he did, what kind of ruler he was. And of them all, this particular monument in Ankara, the writing was in the inside, I believe. So this particular monument survived the longest, and it preserved most of this inscription. So now we can read what he did. Wars, both civil and foreign, I undertook throughout the world, on sea, on land, and when victorious, I spared all citizens who sued for pardon. The foreign nations which could with safety be pardoned, I prefer to save rather than destroy. This is a neat Roman practice. I mean, if their enemies were too wild, it was a genocide right then, right there. Romans, they didn't fuck around, let me tell you that. The number of Roman citizens who bound themselves to me by military oath was about 500,000. Anyways, you get the idea. He assigned lands, he gave money, he was a benevolent ruler, he was merciful, he was a Chad, basically. This is the monument with which Augustus praises his own deeds, and it has reached so far. So it's no wonder why powerful people want to carve like a list of deeds or principles in stone. Also, throughout the Anglo-Saxon world, especially in England, Scotland, and Wales, there used to be these things called follies, basically rich barons or people with lots of land or money or both, built these like strange towers and weird structures that had no particular purpose but to look cool and be a nice, weird, beautiful, eccentric part of the landscape. Google follies and you'll see much more. But it's really cool. Also, it's something I would do if I were extremely rich. I would have something like this, but below it there would be a library and a soup kitchen. So it would be a weird structure and everyone comes and has a nice sandwich. And of course, in the present day and age, billionaires of a, let's say, less stylish kind and the more insecure kind are building similar things. Like Jeff Bezos is wasting $42 million on a clock that can apparently run for 10,000 years. Man, what an insecure guy. Like, if you want, okay, there are billionaires. Jeff Bezos is not in my list of good billionaires. Sorry, Mr. Bezos, just didn't make the grade. Anyways, let's look at these guidelines and let's review them, in fact, because this is where it starts to get interesting. There is some food for conspiracy theorists in these guidelines, so we're going to go one by one. They're numbered. It's also like a telling sign that the numbers start from 1 to 10, so it's a kind of a corporate thing. I don't think there would be any numbers in Emperor Augustus's monument of deeds. Number 1, I raised tax for big companies. Number 2, I took environmental regulations. Not that kind of ruler. Anyways, here we go. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature. So this comes right in the milieu of the late 1970s. The phrase make room for nature, I'm almost certain the repetition is inspired by this book from Harry Harrison. It's a nice science fiction book about a future world with extreme overpopulation. It's called Make Room, Make Room. So in this monument, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. Also, another evidence for Ted Turner being the architect of this monument comes from the fact that he studied classical history. He was a big media mogul, whatever, billionaire, trillionaire, but he studied classical history and philosophy too, if I'm not mistaken. So he would know about all these monuments and what the emperors did to record their deeds. So it's clear to see the gears of the mind turning, let's say. If you look into the details, they're clear to see. So also in the 1970s, there was this amazing science fiction novel by the same guy who wrote Dune, by the way, the Dosadi Experiment. It's this kind of bizarre science fiction story in which these frog aliens cram like millions or billions of people into a small patch of land the size of the territory of Palestine, I guess. And they're trying to breed a race of super advanced people, or I don't know, like the most dangerous people in the universe. The Dosadi Experiment. Go read this book, it's great. Almost better than Dune. And then in the same time, remember the monument was built in 1979, so this movie came out in 1973, Soylent Green. It's about a future overpopulated world, and basically people are used to make this soup kind of food, and everybody dies at the age 35. Well, they are killed in the Soylent Green factory to make the whatever. It's a plot reveal, but it's an interesting movie. So in the culture of the times, there was this big concern about overpopulation. The world is not going to have enough resources. Like, this is going to be sort of a dystopian future. Of course, this dovetailed really nicely with the 70s being a tumultuous and bleak decade overall. There was the end of the Vietnam War. There was all sorts of crises. The first crisis in the Middle East, the first beginnings of the environmental movement, and kind of global warming concerns, let's say. So it's no wonder why something like this would be written then, you know. So this is not satanic. It's like anybody who was a little educated in those times would be thinking and talking about these things. Anyways, number 9. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Once again, the 1970s vibe is really strong here. Almost like someone who grew up as a hippie, but then kind of became a yuppie-ish kind of proto-yuppie kind of person who acquired power, money, wealth, but still wanted to use that power and use that money for the goals he had when he was a teenager. A hippie or a hippie fellow traveler studying classics as a young, hopeful man. And then number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. I really agree with this rule. You know, I mean, this rule and this rule, they're nice, like poetic poetic pieces of advice, but there's not much concrete. Of course, everyone likes beauty, and everyone likes to seek harmony with the infinite, I guess. Also, this could be taken in a lot of different ways. It could be meant to say that be one with nature, respect nature, or it could just mean acquiesce death, basically. Seek harmony with the infinite, accept death. And of course, it's easy to see how vague phrases like this could be interpreted by conspiracy theorists to mean more sinister things. And then we come to number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. I really agree with this thing. The rights we all enjoy, and in some parts of the world and by some measures are being taken away from us, they were all acquired through like really harsh struggles. I mean, weekends being a holiday is one example. I guess access to abortion is one example. People really fought for these rules. So when you fight for these rules, you kind of also acquire social duties. Like, I mean, it's a bit philosophical, but if you want to enjoy certain freedoms, you also have to be a nice person. You have to basically fit in with your community, carry on responsibilities if it means it could be something as simple as paying tax, or as something as brave as going to the army, who knows. But also it entails just being civic, not being arrogant, not being an a-hole. So this is a really good rule. Number 8, I like. Number 7, this is my favorite law. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. I cannot freaking agree more. Now, this monument was built in the late 1970s. Since then, the world has seen a horrible inflation in corporate and governmental managerial roles. University education is increasing. Everybody is studying. Most people are studying some sort of managerial college education. And who's going to build the chairs and wash the toilets or plumb the gas or whatever? Not the university graduates, I guess. So this translates into an extreme number of educated stupid people in both the private sector and the government. And they do some horrible, horrible stuff, let me tell you. I mean, there was this case in 2017. A girl in London was just selling lemonade, and then some stupid tax inspector or whatever came, and they fined her for £150, and she was traumatized. Get the fuck out of here. How evil. You see, this is one of the biggest problems of our life. Of our lifetime, let's say. It's not the freaking Kali Yuga or the collapse of civilization. Civilization is not collapsing. The problem we have is too much civilization. Too much busybodies, overwork, overthinking, over legislation. Look at this. Can you believe this person who wrote this fine goes home and, he or she needs this job so that he or she can pay for the iPhone internet bill of his or her own kids and so on and so forth. So when these people don't find any troubles to mend or some stuff to manage, they will not say, okay, I guess job's over. No. They will continue finding piece of shit excuses to prolong their stupid careers. This egregious example like this, I'm gonna swear like amına kodumun salakları, aptal puştun evladı. Like literally, the people who need this are too stupid to be allowed to exist. So what happened is that in 2017, France, a herbarium in Australia took on loan these hundreds of years old botanic samples from France, okay? Now, Australia has really tight biosecurity laws, and some fuckface in government said, we destroyed them because the documents did not comply. So, a collection of rare plants, hundreds of years old. Some of these plants are probably extinct now, or they may never be found again in that location. They're gone forever. Just because a fuckface in the Australian quarantine, whatever, said did not comply. God damn it. Amına kodumun. Geber ya, geber. Piç. Anyways, it just makes me so angry. But it's a good thing to be Turkish in times like this, because for insulting, there is no finer language. For swearing, there's no better language. Maybe Arabic, I don't know. So this is number 8. I cannot agree with this more. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Of course, how is this going to happen? I have no idea. Maybe we could turn it into a civic duty. So in an ideal future memo society, remember, going back on this number 8 with social rights and social duties. So everybody has to serve the state in some way. But you don't need to be a Starship Troopers soldier or whatever. Like, the service could mean just work in this government office for 2 years. That's it. So you do the government's job. I'm sure you'll do a better job than most government officials. But of course, in governments, and also in private companies too, I mean, there are so many entrenched people that there's a snowball's chance in hell that they will let anyone do this. So I don't know. But this is one of the biggest and worst problems of our lifetime. Anyways, number 6. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Now, this kind of contradicts with the need to avoid petty laws, don't you think? Because who's going to enforce the world laws? World police? How are you going to employ the world police? You're going to have to create some careers. There's going to be bureaucrats and I guess world police prosecutors and world police officers and people to make helicopters for them and to maintain those helicopters, and a world police database and IT specialists to maintain that database. And you see where I'm going with this. This contradicts with the previous commandment. So I don't know. I mean, it's a good thing to want something like this, and something like this did exist. The League of Nations looks like a goddamn artistic coffee roastery logo now, and it succeeded about as much as an artistic coffee roastery for keeping world peace. It failed, and it did not prevent World War II from starting. Now we have the United Nations. They're slightly more effective, so at least people can shout and vent and make a spectacle out of voicing their concerns. Number 5, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Okay, this is once again good on practice, but who watches the watchman? This is really in contradiction with the need to avoid petty laws. I mean, I think it's better to be fucked by your own government than being fucked by the world police or some other government. I mean, there I've said it. Who watches the watchman? Anyways, then there's number 4. This is the one I find most objectionable. I really agreed with Rule 8, but this rule, I cannot hate this rule enough. Rule passion, faith, and tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Now, this is a classic symptom of the optimistic secularism that was really popular from, let's say, the 1970s until maybe 10 years ago, the 2010s or something. People assumed that, if we were just rational, we would avoid religious extremism. We would be rational actors, making rational decisions about what to purchase, what to buy, which holidays to go on, which political party to vote for. I read this candidate. No, all of these are ruled emotionally, and it's actually, let's do a little correction here. Rule logic and reason with faith, tradition, and passion. I'm gonna change this fucking rule. Number 4, reign in logic and reason with faith, tradition, and passion. Because I'll let you know, the ultimate result of a society in which every decision is taken logically is an insect colony. There will be no people as we know them. There will be no human enjoyment. Everything will be and this will create a network of power so harsh that dictatorships of the past are gonna look soft in comparison. So no. In everyday life, reign in logic and reason with faith, tradition, and passion. If you're one of my young viewers, let this be Uncle Memo's lesson to you all. Logic is a tool. It's great for doing certain things, and I will not deny that science, reason, and logic have given us great advances in medicine, let's say technology, communications, transport, all that, but it all comes at a price. The tool must never wield the hand. The tool must never wield the hand. This would be my rule. In fact, much smarter people than I have written about this. My favorite among them is one, Lewis Mumford. Like, Google this guy right away and buy his books, actual books, read them. And he really, like, he was a, oh my God, the one world government is trying to poison me. Lewis Mumford is a self-taught architectural critic, so his most of his writings are about architecture, but from there he veers on to this really refreshing, illuminating, and dare I say divine teachings about how society should balance reason, science, and just humanity. And these are some of his quotes, and I'm just going to read them out loud because, like, believe me, forget the Georgia Guidestones, forget the conspiracy, forget Satan, fuck Satan, but like, if you're gonna have one takeaway from this video, it has to be this: Lewis Mumford and his writings about society. He says, and by the way, he's no like extreme leftist, like, you know, like, he's like a solid centrist architectural critic. He says, Western society has accepted as unquestionable a technological imperative that is quite as arbitrary as the most primitive taboo. Not merely the duty to foster invention and constantly to create technological novelties, but equally the duty to surrender to these novelties unconditionally, just because they are offered without respect to their human consequences. I could not agree more. Every year there's like disruption, innovation. Why? People are following this like a goddamn cargo cult. Another quote: a day spent without the sight or sound of beauty, the contemplation of mystery, or the search of truth is a poverty-stricken day, and a succession of such days is fucking fatal to human life. Preach, my brother, preach on. Humans evolved in a way that we need some, I'm not saying like go mystical or worship at a crystal or whatever, but we need a sense of purpose. We need a sense of, because of that, we need a sense of mystical unknownability, just a little, just enough to keep us going. And if logic needs to be burned at this altar, bring on the flamethrowers. And this is Mumford's amazing critique of the metropolitan city and the worldview that it created. This metropolitan world is a world where flesh and blood is less real than paper and ink and celluloid. And to this day, we might add also the computer screen and the smartphone screen. It is a world where great masses of people, unable to have direct contact with more satisfying means of living, take life vicariously as readers, spectators, and passive observers. Living thus, second-hand, remote from the nature that is outside them, and no less remote from the nature within, handicapped as lovers and parents by the routine of the metropolis and by the constant specter of insecurity that hovers over its bold towers and shadowed streets, living thus, the mass of inhabitants remain in a state bordering on the pathological. Mumford always says that we need to build our cities in a more human way, but in order to do that, we need to evaluate our prime axioms of what it means to live in a technological scientific society. And he says there must be a core of humanity in the center of human interactions. Certain things must be holy, and they must not be made more efficient, because if we make them more efficient, we cut off humanity with what makes us human, basically. Anyways, I hope this side lesson was a good one. And well, this is one of the, Lewis Mumford is one of my keystone writers, so I really recommend you all of his books. Buy them and read them. And my favorite quote, of course: forget the fucking motor car and build cities for lovers and friends. Now, this might sound like a, hippy-dippy thing to say, but true. I mean, who wants to live near a highway exchange? In fact, the best cities to live in, even also the most expensive ones, they are the kind of cities that you kind of get to walk around a little in. There's a street, there are trees, there are places to sit, and there are also places for random interactions. But if we designed our cities and our lives with, tempered reason, we're going to end up like termites. So, no. Anyways, Rule number 3. Unite humanity with a living new language. This is not such a bad idea on paper, but once again, why create a new language while just shift to the most common one? In our day and age, this is English, and this is the language I'm trying to speak. If it was Chinese, I would learn Chinese. If it was Portuguese, I would learn Portuguese. And in fact, such an attempt has been made. This is called Esperanto. It was developed in the 1930s, I believe. It was designed to be this easiest to understand language. There are no complex rules. Every letter is read as it is written. And this flag, it's not the flag of a failed African revolution. It's the flag of the Esperanto language. And you can actually get a sense of it even if you read just without knowing anything. For example, thank you means dankon. I don't understand you means mi ne comprenas vin. Vin is you. No, ne means so. It's like no understand you. I guess it's okay. I don't know. It's a fun language to learn, but let's face it, it's not gonna be a living new language for humanity. If anything, it's gonna end up like this. It's a famous cartoon. My compliments to kxcd.com. Situation: if there are 14 competing standards, 14 ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that covers everyone's cases. Yeah. Soon there are 15 standards. So just shift to the most popular one. Okay, so now we come to the spicy commandments, and these are really things I cannot agree with. Maybe they were written with good intent, but let's just say, they lead to ugly places. This is another one of those human, biological, natural things that we must not interfere with logically. Let nature take its course. Let nature take its course. Number 2 of these rules says, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Sorry, never gonna happen. No one's gonna tell me who to fuck and who to have kids or not to have kids or the number of kids to have. Just never gonna happen. No matter how many things companies and governments control, they're still not gonna be able to control the good old bees and the flowers, I guess. What was it? The bugs or the bees? No. Anyways, they're never gonna be able to control the human urge to reproduce or the human ability to reproduce. Now, it was considered back in the good old days, especially in the United States, eugenics were a big thing. And this is one of those embarrassing things that especially America likes to pretend never existed, but it did exist, especially in the Midwest. There were these big movements for creating these standards to control reproduction so that they attempted to register human pedigrees and basically filter out the unwanted diseases, let's say. Insanity, epilepsy, or things like idiocy. Now the problem is, on the surface, on paper, yeah, of course nobody wants to have, let's say, diabetics, okay? You breed diabetics out, but then again, like one of my closest friends and an amazing artist, he's a diabetic. Would you have him not reproduce, or would you have him filtered out? This is the thing with nature. The characters which we prize and value today may be maladaptive in the long run. Like, if you breed people to be too smart, then you're going to have schizophrenics. Like, 1 or 2 are going to crop up in every family. If you filter out the schizophrenics, you're going to be filtering out the potential for genius, so on and so forth. So there are all these embarrassing movements, especially in the US, but elsewhere in the world. In fact, the Germans borrowed the term from the US and took it to its logical and horrible conclusion. Another reason why you should not have tempered logic making the main decisions in anybody's lives. But there used to be these kinds of things like, only healthy seed must be sown. Only chads can come, I guess. Some people are born to be a burden on the rest. Who are these people? Who gets to decide? Not you. Sorry. This is just such a dangerous idea. Now, of course, it's not a dangerous idea to want everyone to be healthy, but you're not going to have it. Like, look at the unfit human traits this pamphlet lists. feeble-mindedness, epilepsy, criminality. There's no gene for criminality. In fact, I think the United States, let's say the current culture being upheld in the United States and the Western world, prizes criminality. A lot of people who would be like petty criminals in the ancient world, they are CEOs and managers in this day and age. There's no gene. Like, how do you filter this out? You can't. Criminality is just a increase in intelligence combined with a decrease of empathy, perhaps. But there are no genes controlling this. Insanity. How do you control insanity? I don't know. Alcoholism. This is determined a little by genes, but once again, pauperism. Like being poor is an unfit trait? If everyone is bred to be rich, how do you it's horrible. There's no good way of looking at this. This is complete shit. Anyways, number 1, maintain humanity under 500,000 population, I guess, in perpetual balance with nature. Now, once again, this is a good thing to ask for, but you're never gonna have it. Like, how are you gonna put like sperm blockers or like IUDs, smart IUDs in women? No, never gonna happen. How are you gonna maintain those devices? It could only happen if like people landed on a new planet and then this rule was upheld from day one. But even then, it's just it's not even a human urge. It's the urge of life. You cannot tame life. I'm sorry. No corporate or government structure is going to be able to tame life. But in fact, we don't need to enact some sort of global monument stone philosophy for populations to peter out by themselves. As more people live in cities, they just reproduce less. We see this all over the world. In the present day and age, the population of the entire world is leveling. In Asia and Europe, they're actually gonna be decreasing really soon. And only Africa is shooting up. But I think they're also gonna like level in a certain point when more people live in cities. Now, we can have a debate about whether living in cities is good or bad. And I think living in cities greater than 1 million people is horrible. Or let's say not even 1 million, 100,000, it must be the maximum size for cities. But there's something nice about living in a city as well. So, this problem is going to take care of itself. You don't need, maybe it's not going to be 500 million, but maybe 5 billion. But even with today's technology, that's a sustainable number. So anyways, that's it. Let's see. How would I go about if I was to make a monument like if Jeff Bezos came to me and said, CM Kozeman, I watched your video. I heard what you wrote about Lewis Mumford, so I gave his works a read. And now I stand before you, a rich convert. Ask of me what you will. Dile benden ne dilersen. I would say, thank you, Mr. Bezos. I'm just a humble YouTuber with barely 35,000 subs. But I want to make my own Georgia Guidestones. What would I write? I think it would say something like, our world died, trapped between the boundless arrogance of its ruling class and the savage fury of its less fortunate. That's how our world died. At least we had a few fun times. Learn about our ways of life and try not to repeat our mistakes. And above all, have a nice day. So this would be my Georgia Guidestone monument. And what I would do is I would not just make one monument everywhere, but I would actually ask Mr. Bezos to create this factory to create millions of copies of these stones. They would be kind of like sized like a newspaper page. And I would ship all these stones to every city in the world. I would have them used as pavement stones. I would have them be buried in the mud. So I would ensure they would be fossilized. So this message would be conveyed to the civilization that's gonna follow us in the future. And heck, you're a fool if you think human civilization is gonna last forever. But don't worry, we're not living in the end days. I think humanity still has at least 1 million years to go. We're just gonna dial it back to 1920s level technology and life comfort, and then it's gonna undulate like that for a while. Anyways, and I mean, I hope this podcast, with all these illustrations and slides, I hope I was able to teach you one thing. Forget the Georgia Guidestone, forget anything. Here's a nice way to look at things. It could be anything. It could be this gender reveal boombox from Tannerite Company. There is a way to look at certain things. You must not look at it in terms of this is good or this is bad or this is like done by someone else to oppress us, or it's a recipe for the perfect society, because perfect opposites do not exist in life. When you're examining any certain thing, it could be the, once again, gender reveal boombox, always consider it as an intersection of the people around it who made it possible, their lives, their tribulations, how they were born, how they were raised, what they studied. Always look into contemporary events and trends, like we did with the Georgia Guidestones and 1970s science fiction books. Always look at historic precedents, and always look at their future implications. If you look at things this way, I'm sure you're gonna, I certainly assure you, you're gonna have an interesting time, you're gonna have a good time, and you're gonna have some nice, original, helpful ideas of your own. Well, I hope this was helpful. Please consider supporting me on patreon.com/CMKozeman. Now, it's not the end times, but economies around the world are getting kind of bad. So even if you donate $1 per month, it really helps me. And if you donate to me on Patreon, you will actually be able to download this PowerPoint for free, so you can show it to your friends and impress them. So please support me on patreon.com. And when you're considering any issue, it could be an animal, a monument, a historic event, a person, always remember this diagram. Anyways, have a nice day and goodbye.